Explained show. It is, you know what, I just took off my glasses, but I have to put them back on to see that it is August 10th.
August 10th.
2023. I like that, yeah, the summer is going to end soon because it is way too hot. It's way too hot. I can't stand it. But kids started school, so
Nice.
that's cool. That's cool. I'm your host, Adam Blue, and joining me, as always, Stephan of Midnight Hatter. How you doing, man?
Doing well. Yeah, it was a nice, cool morning this morning. I was able to get my daughter out and take her for a walk around the block. That was a lot of fun. So, but you know, it's gonna hit high 80s later today. So, you know, we'll hunker down inside.
Yeah, good to get the walks in. I got to do that more. My wife was even bringing that up to me. She's like, we got to go out and walk more. And it's just because it's just so hard to, because it's so like here the heat. Like they even have it for like they sent out an email that's saying when kids start school, they won't be outside for recess because they have these heat warnings here in Texas where they're telling people just to stay inside. It's crazy. And so I can feel it. Like I can definitely feel that I'm not moving around that much, and I hate it. Especially I redid the backyard recently and I've been wanting to enjoy that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, you put all this effort into, you know, I actually just had landscapers redo some of the backyard here, and you know, we haven't really been able to enjoy it, but you know,
so you're getting your backyard redone?
A little bit, you know, nothing crazy.
Yeah,
I definitely have room for a pool, but you know, that's
that'd be sweet. I don't know. That's a lot of work, and then I'd be scared, you know, with the kid, you know.
Exactly.
Unless you got like either an above ground or just those small little kiddie pools, just for fun, like just lay out there.
Yeah, that'd be the way to go for sure.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, unrelated, but I'm you know, watching the stream here, and I need to reverse my light setup because the way I'm seeing it, it almost looks like we're in the same room. The way that our lights bleed together.
Oh,
like
that's interesting.
There's like a.
No, that's actually pretty cool though. Actually, that's kind of funny. I mean, because then it looks like we're recording locally.
We're just using different cameras.
No, that's hilarious. No, that's cool. You know, speaking of the podcast today, I don't really have any main topics for today, so it's really, I mean, there's things to talk about, and I could talk forever. I used to do this show where it was by myself talking for an hour, so
you know, sometimes I wonder how these streamers that go for like, you know, 8 to 12 hours in a day, what do you do all day, you know?
You know, that's interesting. There was, I forget, and I guess that is when it's like their job, because, and it makes me think of like my, you know, I do this live stream in between my work, and I think sometimes how busy I am with my job. So I could only imagine if I was doing YouTube or podcasting full time, I would probably have a few shows that may be hours at length, or you know, I think we were talking about that before. It'd be really cool if every day we could have like different shows about different things. And
I mean, like I would love to start streaming, you know, full gunpla builds. One of the problems I think is that I'm so slow when it comes to building a gunpla that I can't sit down and finish a high grade in an hour, you know. It would be a 4 to 8 hour stream.
That's a good point, because when I was the couple times that I've done like a live build, like it would be like an hour or something, and I would get like a leg done on a GM or something.
And usually you have like a joint is reversed or backwards or something.
And I'm like, what did I do? And then you're spending time fixing it, and then you're like, I'm doing this live, and then like your whole world's upside down. No, that's fun though. I tell you, I would, and I hope I get to a point sometime soon where I'd be doing more live streams. It just really is a matter of time, you know.
Right.
It really is. A couple things, and might talk about a little bit more, like UC Engage has a release date, which is pretty neat. Been wanting to play that. You know, I just did my video that just went up on building that high grade Nightingale. What's the biggest kit you've built?
So I guess the biggest kit would probably be that high grade
Psycho.
Oh yeah, the Psycho Gundam. Where'd my Psycho Gundam go?
Yeah, it's funny how lately I've noticed you changed up your setup back there. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's kind of scary. Something that tall that's kind of walked off on its own.
Yeah, it's a good thing I don't have any of those mega size, like the 1/48
Oh
scale
yeah,
kits, the ones that are like the size of my kid.
yeah.
Just a Zaku standing in the hallway.
Oh, that would be creepy. But that's, you would say, the biggest. Yeah, that is actually pretty
That's the
big.
biggest I've built,
Yeah.
but I do have that high grade Dendrobium orcus sitting in the garage
Ooh.
that is just waiting to be cracked open
Yeah, I think
and butchered.
someone in the comments said that is bigger than
It is, yeah, for
the
sure.
90. That would be.
Um,
Yeah, actually, where did I put my Nightingale? I would almost say the Psycho Gundam could almost be same or bigger. It might be taller. It just doesn't have that
right.
booty. That's the difference,
The old wagon.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think I saw someone in the comments of your Nightingale video mention that the Sazabi would be a good one to use for reference, like for comparison's sake.
Yeah,
So, and I think that the Sazabi is pretty chunky. He's a pretty
it
big kit,
is. It
compared to some small boys.
it is similar. Like it's interesting because they do have very similar design aesthetics on purpose to it, but
Right.
it's now I'm starting to appreciate the Sazabi. Hmm.
Right. And then so if you can imagine this, but with wings out to about here,
Yeah,
that would be. And then,
exactly.
for comparison's sake, if we're going to be thorough, I guess this would be because you actually do have a
Yep,
high grade the O.
that's right.
So the O is actually pretty
Wow.
close in size to the Zazabi.
Yeah.
They're about the same height. The O is a little bit chunkier, but hey, there's your size comparison.
That's cool. That reminds me, I need to finish. I just got that green paint for the rest of the thrusters on the O
Nice.
because yeah, the O, the Sazabi, like Nightingale, those are just cool last boss style, mobile suits.
Yeah, there's something about that, like, I can't think of a video game that you don't fight, a massive boss as the
Yeah.
final enemy, except maybe like Legend of Zelda 2, where you fight Dark Link. Like that's
Oh yeah, that type of thing. But yeah, you're right. I love it. There's something about those giant last bosses, and just thinking of some of the boss battles, even in the SD Gundam Battle Alliance, because it had Psycho Gundam, it had the O. Even though it wasn't like a gigantic, it was still like a big and scary mobile suit to fight. Even the Cublé.
Well, and that was a shocking realization that I made when I was working on the Gundam 5e tabletop game, is that I categorized something like the Dovin Wolf as a large mobile suit. Most of them are medium-sized mobile suits. The Dovin Wolf I categorized as large because I always considered it big. But then it wasn't until I actually got the Zazabi model kit and held it up alongside the Dovin Wolf, the Zazabi's bigger. So it's
Oh
like if the Dovin
wow.
Wolf is large, then the Zazabi has to be large, and
Yeah.
then the O has, it creates this whole scale comparison as far as tabletop gaming goes. But
Yeah.
so it's
Even
just it's fascinating. I think you mentioned before appreciating something when you have a 3D copy of it.
representation of it, yeah, because
Yeah,
that's the thing. A lot of times, in just like you were saying about size, when you're watching the animation, sometimes it's really hard to really get a idea of size between different mobile suits. You don't really think about it, like, because a lot of times they might not be framed together, or there's that perspective based on if they're in space, and it's hard to get perspective in space since there's a lot
it's
of
true.
empty space. So yeah, that's the thing. Like building the gunpla, it's like you really get a better idea of the size. And what's interesting about that is that that's what makes Gundam cool even more, is like the attention to detail on the size and the consistency, when it's really hard to determine that from watching it. You're not going to watch it and be like, well, in that frame it looks bigger than normal. And, that normally doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And the video games can sometimes distort that too.
Oh yeah.
The Psycho Gundam itself is really only probably like 1.8 to two times as large as your average mobile suit. If the average mobile suit's 18 meters, I think that the Psycho Gundam's about 40.
Wow.
So you would expect in video games that would be the comparison. Is It's like, okay, it's about half as large, or twice as large. But sometimes you play these video games and these mobile armors are like dwarfing you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. And then you just realize then, like, wow, it's really that big. It's pretty cool. It is pretty cool because there's that give and take. I'm sure they have to think about where, like, okay, we want to sell a kit of this, but is that practical to produce? And then sometimes they try to, knowing that that's not something that's practical, you know?
Hey, but you know what? Sometimes it's more practical than you realize. Like when you have a P Bandai Neo Zeong 2 that you think, who's really going to buy a
Oh, yeah.
$300 Neo Zeong? And
And
then
it
it
kept
sells
selling
out
out.
3 times.
Yeah.
Like,
I know. That's a good, man. I would like to get that, but it's one of those things where spending that much, there's other things at that price I would get that I've been holding off. Yeah.
it's a good way of looking at it.
Speaking of,
Priorities.
well, speaking of recent gets, I have not got. I mean, the last thing I got, and I don't remember if I shared this. It actually had a sneak peek in my latest video. It's the Mobile Suit Ensemble Nightingale.
Nice.
I did that little trick where I was like, "Well, this is the high grade." I was like, "No, I love these things. I can't get enough of the Mobile Suit Ensemble, and this
They're
Nightingale
very
is
cool.
it.
We've talked about it before. The proportions on them are very cool. It's almost closer to that cross silhouette proportion. So it's not like quite SD.
And well, you know what? I'm now the comparison I'll always make, and it's since you brought this up, was how Warhammer minis are more chunkier than
Yeah,
than their actual proportions. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's all that really is. These Mobile Suit Ensemble figures are like that kind of Warhammer style chunkiness, where it's not over the top, cartoony, giant head, little feet, no legs. It's like
right.
just stylized a little chunkier. And I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really draws your attention to the key details of the unit, and I think a lot of so we've been talking about Gundam video games and the Gundam video games that are coming out, like UC Engage. We've got a new SD G generation
Oh
game
yeah.
that's coming out on mobile, and I've seen a common criticism of it is like, man, I would love to play one of the G generation games if only they weren't SD. And while I understand that sentiment and I agree with it to a certain extent, what you have to appreciate about the SD proportions is that when you're looking at a tactical battle map, it becomes so much easier to identify which units are which. I mean, could you imagine if it were not SD, if it were regular proportions? How hard would you'd have to like zoom in and zoom out and try to identify which units are which because
You
you don't know. And the nice thing about those SD proportions, those slightly chunkier proportions, is that it highlights all of the major details. It's
yeah,
like I
to
know that's a Zeta
identify.
Gundam because I see it.
You know what? That is pretty neat you brought that up because I'm a huge fan of RTS games and the first few RTS games, Warcraft, Command and Conquer, they used pixel graphics. The pixels were kind of bigger, so
Yeah,
they could kind of get the. And as games started getting more detailed, it would be hard to see that's one complaint I would have with some later RTSs is like I can't really make out the units. And if they were in some sort of SD proportion, I'd be able to make it out better, but then I might not be as interested. It's a weird, interesting
yeah.
balance, but it makes sense. And I wonder, like with StarCraft, even StarCraft seems to slightly do that. Not too much,
Yes.
but they kind of have a slight chunk, like to the
That
Space Marines and
that's
all that.
where that whole like Blizzard art style came from, is like the Warcraft games, because it's like, oh well, I
Yeah.
have to be able to identify my units as I'm moving them across the screen. So it really is like a UI concern. And so yeah, when you have like a model kit of it, you probably don't appreciate it as much. But
Yeah,
I don't
you know
know.
what? So it's like the more things get realistic, the harder they are to actually see. It's almost as if things that are stylized give you more information.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in a
that's
way.
very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm glad we talked about this then because I think RTSs have been one of my favorite genres. They just rarely come out, and when they do, they're just okay. You know,
Yeah,
um,
people aren't really pushing the boundaries when it comes to RTS, because I
yeah.
mean, you're kind of restricted in what type of gameplay. You're really just going to be storming bases, right? Base
There's this,
building and
yeah, and I guess what they've kind of been doing lately, which has been kind of scaling them back, but making them fun, I guess, is where they're more like a tower defense or survival, where it's like you just build within this area and you wait for waves of enemies to come at you instead of the whole free form. I have this big map to build and move troops around. I think because people either like to build or they like to fight, and I think the crossover of people that like to both build and fight is not that big. It seems to be one or the other. Even like the Civilization games, even though you do fight in them, it's more about management of your world, the military, instead of individual
And I
units.
typically fight with culture. I'm the guy that builds the libraries, and then all of a sudden, all the cities around you join you.
That's cool. And that's funny. That's why I've never gotten to the civilization games, because of that sort of. It's almost like a perceived war instead of the actual. I like when I'm moving an individual unit. It was interesting because in Command and Conquer 3, they introduced when you built one unit, it was a squad of 5.
Yeah.
Again, a way to make it look like you know what you're controlling. It's bigger. I think, yeah, a Company of Heroes did that too, where you built one troop and it was like a squad of them. Um,
And I
because
think that's how Gihren's Greed kind of plays, where when
oh,
you're on the map, it's like you have a unit, but then when the combat opens up, there's several,
okay,
Zaku's on screen.
yeah, I gotta say, man, the a Gundam RTS needs to happen, and I
Yeah,
just it. I wish I could do it. I wish I could snap my fingers and make it happen. It's like the tools are there, but it's the time investment.
exactly.
And then at my age, it's like if I'm going to invest all my time into that, does that mean maybe then I need to invest time in being a game developer? But maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know. Yeah, we'll see
I
where that
mean, game
goes.
dev is a pretty fun hobby, and I've been
Yeah.
enjoying some of the stuff we've been working on together.
Yeah.
I think that next stage of RTS would be like a RTS with a grand strategy laid on top of it, so that you're
I think
doing
so.
like kind of, if there's like a Gundam themed RTS, you have your individual battle maps, but then you can zoom out and you have like the whole, colonies and Earth, and you can kind of control the different fronts, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's that other layer, because I think what happens with the RTS genre is for people it gets boring because it is kind of just okay, you build your base, you build troops to go out and fight and kill. But that additional layer of, okay, I've built this and this is a good defense. Let me zoom out and go check and see how these other areas are doing. Yeah, almost like it's a real time open world where instead of a linear progression of missions, they're all happening at once.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, I think we were kind of putting stuff like that together with the yeah, zooming out, going to different colonies, going back. Oh, Xeon's pushing some more. I gotta,
Right. I lost some ground and need to make it back up and that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's this game. I forget what it's called. It's coming out really soon. There's already like IGN has preview trailers of it, but it's an RTS, but also first person shooter. And I know that's been tried a lot in the past, but this actually looks really good. Because at first it looked like a Doom style corridor shooter. And then all of a sudden they
Okay.
were outside, zoomed out, and there was all these troops going to a base. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here?
That sounds wild.
I know. Yeah, that does. But have you been playing any games recently? Any video games?
No, I mean, I just wrapped up Tears of the Kingdom,
Oh,
finally.
cool.
So, at least I've put that investment behind me. I can stop messing with it. But as I start working on some more video games, I keep going back to certain games that I just love the control of. No pun intended. So one of the games that I picked up again was Control.
Oh yeah.
Um, I just
That-
love that is the kind of game where if you took all of the enemies and the quests and like the story out of it, I would still have fun just playing as Jesse, running around, flying, throwing things. Like it's such a
I never
physics
beat
heavy
it.
game.
I
Neither have I.
Oh, okay. I keep stopping. Like for some reason, like I get maybe the first third or fourth of the game, and then I'll just because I feel like the controls are on point. I even think the overall mission quest structure system is on point. What I think happens is I get bored of the environments, because it's just an office space so far. I mean, maybe it opens up more.
Yeah, there's some interesting things that they do with the setting, I would say. And
Okay.
but I think where I get stumped is I will arrive at an area where there's no obvious indication that you're missing a piece to move forward.
Yeah. And I'll be looking at my map to be like, okay, is there some place I don't remember I should go back to? Yeah, I remember that happening.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I spent probably 3 days on and off stuck in that stupid maze that like, you go through the maze, and the walls kind of shift,
Yeah.
and then you go through the maze again and the walls kind of shift, and there's no way out of it. So I'm like, are the pictures part of the puzzle? Is it the phone that's on the table? What do I do to
Wow.
get out of this maze? And then I ended up caving and looked online, and they were like, oh, well, it's actually part of this other quest that you know. And I'm like, well, how was I supposed to know that?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's I might jump back into that again because I've been I for some reason I like the third person sort of action, but with the adventure aspect to it because you are
Yeah.
doing some exploration. Because so I just beat the final DLC map for Sniper Elite 5, and I feel like Sniper Elite 5 is one of those games where it's successful for those people that like whenever a sniper game comes out, there is a large enough fan base to buy the game, so then they keep making more. But I
Yeah.
don't think within that fan base are game developer slash influencers, to like say, okay, there's systems here that should be used in other games. Because to me, Sniper Elite 5 does things that it's like, oh, I feel like any third person action adventure game can feel different, but use the setup of this open world level design
Yeah.
that a lot of games don't do, and I think should do, because not everything needs to be just one big open world. You know,
Right. Yeah, I really appreciate when you've described to me the way that Sniper Elite 5 has this sort of like open world, but still mission contained
yeah,
structure. And I think that there are some games like that where maybe the initial mechanics are really popular, but the game itself doesn't have enough of a mass market appeal in order to kind of take
yeah.
a foothold. So, like, one example I would say is Operation Winback.
Oh yeah, I
That was
love
like
that
one of
game.
the first games to introduce a cover bait, like a cover shooting
Yep.
system. But it was such a small game. It was on the N64, or I think it might
It
have been on the PS2 as
yeah, it
well, or at
started
least a
just in
sequel.
64. Later there was a PS2 port, but I feel like they designed the controls for the N64. So when you play it
It felt
on
that way.
PS2, it just wasn't the same.
Yeah, but now cover shooting is
Everywhere. Yeah.
everywhere. You don't have a Naughty Dog game without cover shooting.
Yeah, and what's really neat is with the sniper games is it does an automatic cover. If I'm ducking behind a structure and I'm close enough to the edge, it will stick me to it, and then I can, stick out. And so to tie it back into Gundam, this is where I wish Bandai would take a Gundam game is to make it where it has very interesting mechanics. Even though, yeah, I want a Gundam RTS, I want an open world Gundam game, but why not introduce a Gundam game that is it's like interesting on its own. It's like and I keep saying single player because I think single player games are still strong, and we see that they
I
are
agree.
with like Zelda. Like there needs to be a single player Gundam game that just does its own thing in a very interesting way. Because I think Dynasty Warriors, that's just Gundam, like
Yeah,
or
hack
they
and
just took
slash.
that. Yeah, and SD Gundam Battle Alliance, while that was cool, it really took the Marvel Ultimate Alliance formula, which was fine, but even for Marvel Ultimate Alliance, it was very specific to that. Gundam Evolution being a hero shooter. And while I think Battle Operation 2 is good, it's really just a PvP game,
Yeah,
really. So it's not
yeah.
like that lends to that you sit down exploration of mechanics on your own time.
It
So,
really sounds
yeah.
to me like you're saying they need to do a remake of Side Story Rise from the Ashes.
Oh, yeah. They
Because that
certainly
is a
do.
Gundam game that really took, it took the experience of being in the 1 Year War and really distilled it down to, you
Yeah.
know, it was its own thing. There's no other games that I can think of that's like, oh, Rise from the Ashes ripped that off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. But what about Zeonic Front? Because that was real. I only played a little bit of it, but it was really hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. Zeonic Front, I love that. I mean, it's one of my favorite
Yeah.
Gundam games of all time. But it really did feel like it reminded me of a Rainbow Six game, a classic Rainbow Six game.
Yeah.
Rainbow Six kind of tried to go the just basic shooter route,
Right.
but the classic Rainbow Six games, people forget there was like a tactical component to
Yeah.
it.
Super
You would
tactical.
move teams to different locations, and you'd have checkpoints and things like that. And then there was the first person shooter part of it. And so
But
that's where Zeonic Front was awesome, is like you had that tactical, I'm gonna make sure that I set up the mission the way I want it to go, and then I'm gonna execute.
have you played it recently?
Zeonic Front,
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been trying to go back through the simulator missions. I think I have an S rank in almost all of them, except for is it like the Desert Fang?
Do
The
you think it still holds up, like for what it's supposed to be?
yeah.
That's cool.
It's yeah. I would not recommend it to sort of casual Gundam fans because most modern Gundam fans are going to be modern gamers, right? They want to hop into a game Fortnite style and just be able to run and gun and do that kind of thing. It is not that type of game. Like you can't just run and gun.
You're
Like
right.
it's
I remembered
you know
that. It took me a while to. I don't even. Maybe I didn't even beat the first level. It was the one where you have like the woods, the forest, and you kind of like move around, but you never know when like the enemy is coming too. And then I think once you got past that, and I guess you get to like a runway, and I
yeah.
think the Gundam or something shows up and just murders everybody.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's like the big tray comes out.
Yeah. There you
Well,
go.
and it's one of those really realistic games where two shots from a tank is going to down your Zaku, and
Yeah.
so you're like, oh, I have to treat every encounter as if it's going to be a deadly one. There's no, you
Yeah. I
know,
need to go back and play through that properly because I just for a previous video started looking at it and I was mainly describing what the story was, but I actually want to dive into because after playing Rise from the Ashes, I was really appreciating like that tactical gameplay. We rarely see that anymore, and I think I'm now I've kind of and I don't want to say this in a mean way, but matured out of like when I play games, I need the action right here, right now that I can, and I'm back to where like I can take my time with stuff. Which I don't blame everyone, but not everyone can. That's why you don't see a lot of those games nowadays.
it's true.
It's
Yeah, I mean, and it goes back to what you were saying about time. Is do you have the time to sit down and be thoughtful and tactical
yeah,
about the way you're approaching a video game, or do you just want to pick up and do a couple matches in GBO and be
yeah,
done with it?
yeah. Um, yeah. Moving on real quick because I saw something from Jonathan Ipan saying thoughts of the Gundam Seed Freedom movie. The reason I want to bring that up is because a second trailer came out, and I
Yeah,
didn't make any content on it or anything like, and I kind of feel bad because if it was UC related, I would make a video right away. And we've talked
yeah,
how the original Seed series doesn't do much for me. Destiny I thought was very entertaining. Um, so I would be interested. I'm actually pretty excited, I guess, for this follow up because if they are kind of speaking of maturing, kind of maturing the aspects and storyline that they did with Destiny, I think this could be pretty interesting.
yeah,
Have you thought about that?
yeah. I know. Being UC snob, I'm like, well, yeah, it's another seed property, but there is a kind of quaint appeal to it, right? Like there's a bit of a nostalgia bug associated with it that it's like, yeah, I would like to go back and see what Kira and Athrun have been up to, and how things have changed, and,
Yeah.
and even seeing just some of the concept art and some of the sort of updated character designs. There's some interesting stuff going on, and I'd like to kind of see how those things have sort of transpired. I mean, the pilot suits look radically different
Yeah.
from the original series. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
But yeah, the only thing I got to get to, and I haven't watched yet, is there was like that Stargazer that was supposed to be like a short film, maybe that came after Destiny, was supposed to be
Mhm.
before Freedom. So, I mean, again, I don't know much of the story that I'll get out of that, and I don't know how much of we'll get a story out of this movie. It reminds me of like in Gundam 00, the movie wasn't a continuation; it was just what next happens in that world, and it was aliens. It's so I wonder with see Destiny, like if it's just going to be just a whole new thing that doesn't necessarily connect. The thing I liked that See Destiny was talking about is how it outright called out the military industrial complex, and I liked how that Durandal guy was knowing like really the only way to stop it is violence. I mean, we're just gonna have to. That's
Yeah.
why I always thought he was really the good guy, and then Kira was trying to stop him, and it's like that. It's like a third. It's like three. Think about it. Durandal realizes the only way to stop the military-industrial complex is you have to fight it. But then Kira's like, no, you shouldn't fight. So I'm going to fight you for wanting to fight someone to stop them from fighting. It was like,
Yeah.
come on. But not
I'm going to
only
kill the peace into you.
yeah, but not only with that, but then I liked, after getting into Macross, how Destiny used that the singer,
Mir Campbell.
yeah, the singer storyline where it was like there was the real singer Lacus, and then they had to have a fake one to just use that as a propaganda tool,
Which is
and
so sad. It's like I felt so bad for Mir
yeah,
and how that went down. And it's so interesting because, and I'm going to kind of go off on a little tangent here, is
yeah,
because you bring up the idea of, well, they had to find a way to replace Lacus in order to kind of keep the propaganda machine going. And that is where I think that Disney Plus show Falcon and the Winter Soldier really fumbled the ball, because like US Agent was supposed to be that same thing for Captain America, and they could have gone so much more rich with that storyline, the way that
oh,
i- i- I mean, I'm sure that the chat is going to crucify me for this, but Seed Destiny did a better job of enacting that sort of propaganda tool replacement than Disney did with, with a storyline that had already been kind of
yeah,
tailor written for them.
dude, interesting you brought that up because it now makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Because I tried watching Falcon Winter Soldier and I couldn't, over time it's getting boring. That character, I didn't really understand the point, but bringing it up that way, it's like, oh, that's pretty interesting. And yeah, then that makes me appreciate Destiny more because it really took themes of the story and went full force with them. It's
Yeah.
like, what do you do when there's a military industrial complex? Who really is the bad guy when you're trying to stop it? And then which is interesting because wouldn't Kira then go stop Logos or whatever, and he didn't until Durandal wanted to, right? Am I
Yeah.
getting the story wrong there?
I mean, Kira's motivation in Destiny is so weird, and I kind of liked that he was the bad guy
Yeah.
for half the season, because it was probably the most interesting thing that they did with his character.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I got to say, like, I feel that's interesting that Seed has elements of interesting story ideas, but then things that were like, why? And it just makes me excited actually to watch Freedom. Although I don't know how it's going to be distributed. It looked like there wasn't anything worldwide so far. It looks like it was just for the Japanese release, I think in January. But
Maybe it's going to be just like the English dub of Kukuru's Doyan's Island, where it's just going to randomly appear. And
well, yeah, well, that's interesting because it would be interesting to see how quickly they dub it, localize it. Well, okay, because there was an English subtitles for Kukuru's right on release. That was what I bought on the Blu-ray, and then there was the dub that came after, and they didn't say anything about it. But with
yep.
Seed, I'm interested in seeing if they are seeing maybe more of a worldwide potential. So then they will have soon maybe an announcement that like, oh, we'll be on streaming services in English.
I'm honestly surprised, and this is one of those things where you got to be honest and criticize Bandai when they do something a little goofy. But how are you going to erect a Freedom Gundam in China and not coordinate your Gundam Seed Freedom movie with that event? Like the marketing potential for a worldwide release of Seed Freedom with the erection of the Freedom Gundam statue is like,
Yeah, that'd be pretty big. That's a good point. I wonder if because I heard that this was like in the making for a while, so I wonder if that was a plan at one point.
oh yeah, it could have been COVID impacted,
Yeah,
perhaps.
yeah, all the COVID stuff. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Well, I mean, speaking of other future shows too, so we know that what's it called? Requiem for Vengeance.
Yep.
We'll probably get more information on that. But with that UC Next 100, we saw UC Engage, which I think it's in October. It's coming out, right?
Yeah. So it's you can pre-order it now, obviously, on your various app stores. But yeah, October, is it 25th,
I think
23rd,
so.
25th, something like that.
Yeah, and it starts the trailer with that UC Next 100. So that's in line with what is supposed to be like Hathaway. So I don't know if Hathaway's supposed to come out next year, the year after. And if so, do we get another or some other UC Next 100, or is it going to be UC Engage and then Hathaway? Because I know Unicorn 2 is supposed to be a part of that. From what I understand, Unicorn 2 comes out after Hathaway 2.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I'm just curious if in the meantime we're going to get like, so for instance, Welcome for Vengeance, Crew Cruise, Doan's Island, those weren't part of UC Next 100, but we got them anyway. So I wonder if there's going to be some other interesting things in the making, like another origin. And who knows if it's going to take place during a certain time frame or.
Yeah, I mean, some of the, would that even qualify as Next 100 if it's still,
right. That's what I think
war.
is neat, because it could mean that there's still potential for other things that haven't been announced yet. Because even Crew Cruise came out of nowhere, and it was just like a few months later it came out or something like that. I forget exactly. Yeah. So that, in when it comes to origin, I think it would be neat, and I don't know what the idea is for them to redo other parts of the original Gundam. I almost feel like they shouldn't, but I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Yeah, it's one of those things I always have mixed feelings whenever there's like kind of a remaster of something. With the Kukuru's Doan's Island, there's definitely a purpose behind it, right? They cut the episode from the original series because they observed that the quality was so bad, and so this was like their kind of opportunity to save it.
Yeah.
But does Gundam itself, the whole original series, does it need saving?
No. Yeah, that's a good point. No. So I would think it would be like a different story. It could be, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know actually, because thinking about it, the only thing I can think of is I heard they're making a manga about Char after that point. Remember the middle of the original 079 where he kind of gets pushed away, pushed out for the failures. Maybe he's getting up to stuff there, and then they do something like that, because it would be cool to have some more origin on Char. But then after that, I feel like there's only so much more they can say with those characters that they have to like move on to Advance Zeta or something.
Yeah. And that's where side stories are always more welcome, I would say, than reinterpretations or expansions on existing characters. I think so. There's that book series, right, for Star Wars, where they kind of have like a bunch of writers step in and do these like mini vignettes that are supposed to take place
from a certain point of view.
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
I think that those are kind of blasphemous to me, is because
it explains story elements that were like, huh? Really?
Yeah. And I think that maybe there's a place for that type of thing. I think DC Comics calls it, like Elseworlds, or the Marvel What If type deal. It's these kind of alternative perspectives on stuff. And we've even talked about how Origin itself is almost like, this is the 1-year war from a certain point of view.
Yeah.
And so when you start doing that kind of thing where you reimagine how these character interactions really happened, then you kind of, I don't know. Do you feel like it takes something away from the original when you kind of, I don't want to say retcon, but like even just reimagine these types of events?
I think it's something you have to be careful with, because like I feel like when the prequels first came out, I think I was fine with them until people were complaining and pointing out their reasoning. And I think it's one of those things where I came from a place where, well, these people that are complaining are coming up with some good reasoning, even though I personally didn't care. But now I'm thinking that, and then the prequels aren't that great, And I feel like I think there's almost like this thin line that they can kind of teeter on, where it's like we want to tell these other stories or other points of view, but not go too far. I think there's a balance. Yeah. And because that is interesting. I even and I sometimes try not to dwell on it, but I'll think of how the Disney Star Wars shows kind of got me out of Star Wars, and I feel bad. And it's like, is that me
Yeah.
just being a little punk? You know? It-
They ruined our childhood.
yeah.
Um,
But I think you're right. I think that can happen, and it has happened. And where I think, so I wasn't into Transformers, but where I think I first heard about it being a thing was when the Transformers movie came out and they like killed Optimus Prime. And then people
yeah.
were like, why would you do that? And then that would just be the thing, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting, because it's like, oh, let's make a movie based on the show that was really good and have some huge pivotal moments happen to characters that kind of then make you think back, like you watch the show again, oh, he's gonna die, isn't he? You know,
Mm,
and I don't know. I was never really into Transformers, but I would even say like Prometheus with the Alien franchise. Like
that's a good example.
I was really fascinated with Prometheus as a movie, even though I was like, this kind of like makes me look at Alien differently, because it's made by Ridley Scott, who, even though James Cameron did a better job of, I think, of interpreting what that in terms
Yeah.
of a follow up story.
Yeah, he
And
definitely expanded on it very, very well.
yeah, and instead with Prometheus, which I got to give it to Ridley Scott. It's an interesting movie, but the story he told probably shouldn't have been within the Alien universe.
No,
Um,
I agree.
and it kind of now and then so then what happens, and that's funny because something like Alien versus Predator made me upset, but something like, and it's funny, it's not nearly as good as a movie as Prometheus, but Prometheus made me a little more upset about the franchise because of the
Because it
story.
recontextualizes those types of things. Alien versus Predator, it's pretty inoffensive.
Right.
Whereas, like, here, I'll ask to bring it back around to Star Wars. I'll ask your opinion on this.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the ending of Rogue One um undermines the ending of A New Hope?
No.
So like, because I feel like a lot of people
Yeah.
felt like, this was that sort of 1 in a million shot that Luke Skywalker took down the Death Star, but then the idea that, oh well, the Death Star was designed to be blown up that way, like it
Oh,
was.
I see what you're talking about. No, I think, because I think Rogue One almost helped in a way, because for me, I'm all into the ship battles.
Yeah,
So showing the intensity of the ship battles just to get the plans out, whether in the end it made it where it was designed that way. So Luke, to me, it was seeing the Rebel Alliance in such an intense, stressful situation just to get the data. For me,
Yeah.
that actually helped me appreciate it more. And then I always thought, well, Luke potentially used the Force to be able to get that shot when no one else could have. So it's almost like,
So it's still a supernatural
yeah,
thing that he did, but it's, yeah, okay,
where
I
like
see that.
maybe the intention wasn't for someone to shoot a proton torpedo down there. It was to somehow get a bomb down there or something else. I don't know. But Luke, taking that, which kind of goes back to some of the things I haven't really thought about. Sometimes there's coincidences in movies, and I'm like, that's a coincidence. But then
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, okay, this is part of that almost spiritual journey people could be on. And I think Luke, and I haven't thought about this until now, but Luke being the one to make that shot that brought him to that moment, I think works now that I'm thinking about it more like that. Just because in life sometimes I come across coincidences where it's like, wow, I happen to be right here right now when I'm the perfect person to do this. Wow, how is that? And it's because Luke was like a good hero character.
Yeah, he was basically living out the hero's journey, and
But-
there's something to be said, I think, about would he have been able to make that shot prior to meeting Obi-Wan Kenobi, and
right. And so that was going to be my next point. That's why I think out of all characters, a prequel with Luke learning to grow up, not knowing his family essentially, but being intrigued by this Uncle Ben, shows kind of the growth he went to. What made Luke be a good guy hero, where he wasn't a sort of Han good guy hero? You know how Han still makes these bad decisions that are selfish?
Yeah.
Like every once in a while, you get a hero like Luke who's not that selfish, even if he's a little whiny, but it's because I think he was in a way oppressed by his family situation when technically he wasn't supposed to be there, you know.
Yeah, I mean, he had to watch all of his friends
Yeah.
basically live out the adventures that he wanted to. You know, when Biggs left home and was like, "Hey, I'm going off to the academy."
Yep.
See you back home, farm boy. Like
You
it's
know what? And that reminds me too, because I remember sometimes people will complain about when Luke went and saw Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru like Shard, and he was like, "Yeah, I want to go fight." But I remember before that, he was like, "No, I can't go. I have responsibilities here. I have to do. There's nothing." And it's like even though they were dead, he still had the homestead, but he was like, "No, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go fight." So yeah, that's. I'm glad we had this little conversation here because it kind of helped me
yeah.
appreciate A New Hope more. Um,
Yeah,
and
it's one of those things where it really is that standard Joseph Campbell hero's journey. But when you learn to appreciate that sometimes, the things that were holding Luke back were more his own excuses. Like he would have made up any excuse in the
yeah,
world to not go with Obi-Wan because that's just who he was.
yeah.
But you know,
And so, and I might have heard this. Did George Lucas cite Joseph Campbell for when he was writing?
not to my
Okay.
knowledge.
Okay. Because, this kind of goes back real quick to that video that I released Monday where I was just translating and reading that interview of Tomino that came with the record that I bought. And
Yeah,
he talked about George Lucas. Like they were literally comparing what they're trying to do with what George Lucas was able to do. And yeah. And so then that goes back to like George Lucas special edition stuff. I didn't mind it, even though there's some stuff that didn't need to happen. How
yeah,
far has Tomino or the Gundam team gone? Which that kind of goes back to there's this interesting level of respect we see with both the original work and working with a creator and even holding back a creator. Like people
yeah.
weren't holding back George Lucas like it sounded like Bandai or Sunrise was holding back Tomino sometimes.
Well, and I would say that, if you want a kind of a like for like comparison, the Gundam movie trilogy is Tomino's remastered edition.
Oh yeah,
Because
that's
that
that's
was
true.
him saying like, "Oh, I'm gonna save Gundam by re-editing it and doing it the right way this time." And it's so funny to me that, both Lucas and Tomino, the right way ended up being the wrong one.
Yeah, that is very interesting because at the end of the day, even as a newer Gundam fan, I totally prefer the series over the movie trilogy.
Yeah.
It just, yeah, some of the changes make sense. Some of them are okay. It's more of just what you're trying to tell. It's almost like you'd have to redo the series to do a trilogy telling that story because then some things just don't land in that
Yeah,
amount of
and
time.
sometimes, it's, when you're a creative and write a story, sometimes you don't realize what you're saying until someone else says it back to you, and I think that
Yeah.
that's what bothers Tomino the most about Gundam and kind of why he's had the sort of visceral reaction towards Gundam fans over the last 40 years is, he told a story that he thought he was saying a particular thing. He thought he was conveying a particular theme. And then when the fans came back and said, "Hey, this is what I got out of it," he's taken aback like that is not what I was trying to say, you know?
Which that's very interesting because I wonder if maybe sometimes we don't realize that we are getting that. We haven't matured to the realization. It's like we're being faced with that verisimilitude,
Yeah,
but we're seeing what could be real, but not really appreciating it for that, even though that is there deep inside. Because even with me, I can think with Star Wars. There are so many more things now I like about Star Wars that I didn't realize was part of Star Wars back when I first saw it. Like the
it's
Eastern
very true.
philosophy being part of a lot of the Force and general, like how you should really treat others and live your life. Like that was embedded into that. And I didn't realize that until much later, but I liked Star Wars the whole time. And I think with Gundam too, at my older age, how I'm breaking it down and thinking about it, I wouldn't have picked up on that when I was younger. I don't
No,
think
definitely.
so.
I mean,
Yeah.
you get a new appreciation for things when you kind of revisit them. So,
Yep. No, good talk. Moving on real quick. One last thing I wanted to talk about real quick. have you heard of those Detolf shelves? You know,
Detail.
the IKEA glass.
Oh, yeah.
Do you happen to have one?
No, but
Okay.
I probably should get one.
Well, apparently they're discontinuing them, but they have a newer
What?
version. But the newer version seems to be pretty good because I have the old one, right? Because everyone
Okay.
got one, and that's I was like, okay, I guess I should. And I actually do like it. I did something over the weekend. I bought so it's like you could put it on the ground, but it
Okay.
is kind of weird when there's that bottom level is just on the ground. So I actually went to Lowe's and bought feet. Or no, I think I bought them on Amazon. They're steel feet, and then I went to Lowe's to get
Awesome.
the screws to put them in. And then I bought lighting. Now the lighting, Rogue New Type, I have 3. Yeah, I think he was showing some the other day. But for the lighting, at first I just got the LED strips, but then I saw that there's almost like a quarter circle, third circle shape, 90-degree, but it's the light is like curved. And I
Yeah.
realized that does a better job. And what happened was like my LED lights totally died. So I was like,
Yeah.
what should I get? And someone suggested, get them with this shape. And so I got that, and then I bought a cable hider thing. It's like a long white tube that I have along the edge of. It's like this metal part of the Detolf where the magnet sticks at the top and the bottom, and I have the cables running along there with the cable hider on that. And then I
Very
bought
clean looking.
some dust proofing weather strips or dust strips that then I put all along it.
Ah,
And I feel very proud of myself. I've had the Detail for like over a year, and then it's just like I just now decided, okay, I'm gonna like make it look really nice. I'm gonna do a video on it and where to get all the supplies for it. But so a couple things I learned from this. One is I think, and I've never encased my figures in dust-proof things before, but I think this is going to be better now because I have a duster with me on the shelf back here that I'm always having to use every once in a while, and it's like, I need to somehow for the
do you ever
really
just
nice
do
stuff.
the compressed air?
Oh yeah, I have this vacuum too. It's a double-sided vacuum. One it sucks in, and one it blows some air out.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's the thing is, it's like impossible for me to encase everything, but
Yeah.
I have this bookshelf that I keep things in. And then I was researching online, and it seems like it's really easy. You can buy these like acrylic panels that I could then buy hinges for, do the weather stripping, and I might do that to my bookshelf then, because I think I have so much stuff out. Like I'll look at my robot spirits, and they're like cased in dust, and it's like I gotta fix that. So I might do
Well, and
something like that.
you can treat your figures and model kits with like an anti-dust static film. The
Really?
Gun Primer makes I think it's called their finishing solution. But it's like a spray that you use it to clean the kit, and then it leaves like a film on that kind of resists dust, which I'm kind of thinking of
Interesting.
doing something like that myself. So
Yeah, okay, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to look into that because I am trying to figure out something. Lately, when I have been reorganizing or moving things, I just notice a lot of dust. And lately, I've tried to be more conscious about it because allergies or whatever. And, just I've slowed down buying stuff. So I'm trying to maintain what I have. And
I think that this is a good, I think what a few weeks ago on the show we talked about like ways of storing your gunpla
yeah,
and what you can do with like old boxes and stuff like that. There's probably not enough content out there on like what you can do, what type of products you can get to display your gunpla, what you can
yeah,
get to clean them. I think that
that's a
this
good
is some
idea.
valuable information that you're bringing out
Yeah.
to us.
Good, good. I'm glad you think so because I am going to do a video of like what I did to my Detolf to make it. Although the new one is supposed like people are complaining about it because it has black edges around it, which on one hand I get it, but on the other hand that helps with the cable hiding, so I don't have to buy.
I was gonna say, it
Yeah.
looks like a Rogue New Type says that the new one has LEDs built in.
Oh, even
Maybe,
better.
which
And then if you're
maybe
doing
that's where that black strip
yeah,
is.
and if you're doing if you want to put the anti-dust the dust proofing things, it's gonna cover space anyway, so having it on that black area on the edges probably helps. Yeah. So that's cool. I think I'm going to do a video on that then, and probably try to do a video on me customizing my bookshelf I have where, yeah, there's a
Heck
place
yeah.
not too far from me where they do custom acrylic panels, and I'm going to get them cut and then get the hinges. There was just another channel I was watching where they were like showing how to make the bottom of your couch into storage space. And there was like push open, yeah, where you push the hinge or whatever the device, the mechanism releases it.
That's awesome.
I'm gonna try to do all that, but guys, we're gonna end it here. End it here a little early. I gotta take off and get some stuff done. Yeah, hopefully you all enjoyed this. I liked kind of how this was just a free form episode. I even had like a screen share up of that Psycho Doga and GBO2. I didn't even get to that. I actually just the free roll today. It gave it to me. And I didn't even know that was the thing. I'm like, a Psycho Doga? I don't know if I really want it. And then I was looking up, what's the unit for today? Psycho Doga. What the? So
it's a general.
Yeah, which is cool. 650. Yeah,
but so. you and I are more raid guys now. It seems
I know. There's something about
the raid. I
never
thought I'd be a raid user. I feel disgusting.
I know, but there's something about it, man. It's fun. So, all right, I'm gonna take off. Everyone, thanks for joining, and we will talk later.